All right, hello again. All right, I'm assuming you guys can hear me all right. I have a very, very exciting message today. It was exciting for me because I've been waiting for this message for over 10 years. It's not a message, so to speak, but it's more so a teaching and understanding. All right? But so that you can understand what an impact this has had on me, I need to share a little bit of my background, right? So, I've been a believer for, I don't know, about 18 years. And long before I came to the upper room, I used to go to church regularly. I used to serve in different ministries. I used to help disadvantaged people in Clayton, drug addicts, and I used to reach out and help prisoners that had come out of prison. Right? Not to high note myself, not because I was a good man, but for me, according to my understanding, that's how I could draw nearer to God. Right? That's what I wanted. I wanted to hear His voice. I wanted to feel His presence. So I've got to join ministries. I've got to go to church. I've got to. I had hundreds, if not thousands, of sermons. I definitely had hundreds of books. Kurong knew me by name. All right? I was one of those people. Okay? But despite all of that, God was always, His presence. I know He was always with me because His fingerprints were always on my life. But His presence was always elusive, you know. I couldn't quite hear from Him, and it was so frustrating, so frustrating. So one day I had a light bulb moment, and I thought, okay, I'm going to church, I'm serving at church, I'm serving in 2 ministries, committees, I'm doing all these things. What I now need to do is a 4-year master's degree in theology, right? On top of work and everything, and then I'll be able to hear God. You guys think I'm serious? Do you think that was a good idea?
No.
And I thank God because He pulled me out of that. He ripped me out. He changed my circumstances completely. He took that option completely off the table. I really believe that would have wrecked me. Spiritually, it would have shipwrecked me. So here I am now, years later, and He's starting to finally show me these things. And very exciting stuff. I've started to engage with it, and it's really spectacular. To some of you, it might seem common sense, but to others of you, I'm really hoping it's going to help you out a bit. All right, now, what I've also been encouraged by is that there's been a common theme here today, if you've noticed. Des spoke about it, and Helena spoke about it. It's about abiding in God, abiding in Christ. Okay? And what I've learned is that is the most effective way to engage with His presence and to hear His voice, to live life with Him. I mean, the stuff Elena said and Des said, totally agree, wonderful stuff. But for the longest time, that used to frustrate me. I believe I'm seated with Christ, but why can't I feel it? Why can't I see it? Why can't I hear it? Why is it not real to me? You know, drive me nuts. So you know what I did? I bought more books and I listened to more sermons. All right? Looked at more courses. Someone had to know, right? No. I just kept running around in circles, running around and around. So let me go to John 15 for a second, okay? I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, He prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I've spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. All right, we all know that. Now it's interesting here that Jesus wasn't talking to the common man. He was talking to His disciples. And He was encouraging, you have to abide in me. Because here's the thing. It's not enough that He abides in you. The magic happens, the fireworks happen, the power happens when we abide in each other. I in Him and Him in me. That's when we bear fruit. Alright? And if you look a bit later in John 15:8, if and when we get to that point where we abide in Him, that is when the Father is glorified, because that is when we bear much fruit. And that is what is also interesting in that verse is that Jesus calls us His disciples, right? Not when you go out casting demons and healing the sick and this and that. Simply abide in Him. That's all it takes. Once you abide in Him, you're going to do all of that stuff, right? So this is what I want to talk to you about today. This is what God has shown me. This is what He's taught me about how to abide in Him. This is what's been so elusive for me for over a decade. Now, abiding in Greek, it means to remain in Him. It means to be present with Him always. It means to never leave Him. Okay? But, I don't mean this to be controversial, but it will make sense later. We first have to find Him. Okay? Because we're looking for Him in the wrong places sometimes. Even those of us that are strong believers. We have to find Him, and we have to enter into Him, and then we abide in Him. Yeah? And that's what He's taught me. So, to get started, I want to talk about a few different things, 3 different things, and then I'm going to hook them all together to see how it all works. All right? The first place I want to begin is with Matthew 15:8, which is a verse I've harped on a lot in the past. Okay? And it's about the mind and the heart. And this is how the verse goes. These people draw near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Okay? I've spoken a lot about this in the past, often in reference to meditation, alright? About how meditation can bring the heart and the mind into alignment. That's when powerful things happen. I'm not talking about meditation today, but what I do want to draw your attention to is that the mind and the heart are different things. Alright? You can think with 2 different parts of you, I guess you want to say. Alright? And they don't always agree with each other. Right? This is what Jesus was talking about. The lips say one thing, which is the mind. But the heart says something else. Right? Out of alignment. He listens to you. He listens to what your mind's going to say, but He also looks at your heart. What is your heart saying? And unfortunately for most of us, what happens in our hearts is a bit of a mystery. Alright? Usually you discover something when you get put into a weird situation, and then you overreact, you blow out of control, or you behave in a way that's totally mysterious to you. You've got to go figure it out. Alright? That's the reaction of the heart. So these things are very different. Alright? So just beware. There is a heart and there's a mind. And they can both have different opinions about the same topic. Okay? Now, let's go to the 2 trees in the Garden of Eden. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. I don't know how many of you guys have heard about these trees, but we have access to these trees all the time. On a daily basis, we can choose which tree to feed off, right? The tree of the knowledge and good and evil is about knowledge. It's about knowing the difference between good and evil. When we feed off that tree, like I did, I gorged myself on that tree, right? What happens is you get filled up with knowledge. And that knowledge brings judgment, it brings condemnation, it brings pain, it brings guilt. It doesn't bring freedom. Okay? That's what happens when you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Regardless of how good your intentions are, when you eat that fruit, it doesn't matter what you do with God or for God, it's not going to please God. Because the fruit's bad. Okay? So you're not going to please God by eating from that tree and then trying to serve Him with it. Okay? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When you eat from that tree, your identity is based on what you know, how much knowledge you have, what you can do with that knowledge. The more you know, the more you can do, the bigger you are. Of course, the bigger you are, the more puffed up you become. The more puffed up you become, the more pride beckons you. Pride sucks you in, and it separates you even more from God. You become even more dependent on that tree. Okay? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is not going to raise you up in your identity as a son. It's going to raise you up in your identity according to what you can do and what you know. Alright? When you feed from that tree, it feels good, it can feel safe and secure because you're in control. You get to choose what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. You get to choose how you serve God and when. And the thing is, it's very seductive because it feels godly. Because you're immersing yourself in Christian literature and Christian information. It feels godly, it feels good, it feels secure. But it's seductive and it's deceptive, because what it does is it puts you in a place of independence from God. Yeah? And the sad part is there are individuals in Christendom, entire churches and denominations that feed entirely from this tree. Okay? And here's the sad irony. These people, churches and denominations, are trying to get back into the Garden of Eden by eating from the tree that got man kicked out in the first place. You see how that works? Alright. Now, the tree of life. This is the tree that is of life, love, relationship, intimacy. Right? It is the tree that Jesus died to give us access to again. Okay? If you feed off this tree, your identity is not based on what you know or what you can do. It's based on who you are, who you really are. And why is it not based on what you know or what you can do? Because Jesus knows it all. And He can do everything. So you don't have to. He'll do everything through you. He'll show you what you need to know. There's no pressure, but you're a son, you're a king, you're a priest. Alright? Feeding from the tree of life is not about independence and control. Feeding from the tree of life is about submission. It's about surrender. Alright? You get that false sense of security when you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But when you eat from the tree of life, there's an element of unpredictability about it, because you're in God's presence. And when you eat from the tree of life, it's all about Him. It's not about you. Right? So sometimes it can be a bit unnerving, but it's a great place to be. It's the place we need to be. You with me up until now? Alright? Alright, now, what I also want to say is this is I'm sure we're all aware of. Just as God is a triune being, we are triune as well, right? We have a body, we have souls and spirits. Now, ordinarily, our spirit is supposed to rule over our soul, and our soul is supposed to rule over our bodies. That's how we were designed. Unfortunately, with some of us, I'm not talking about us in here, I'm talking Christendom, the soul rules over the spirit. Okay? This is particularly true of people that live rather religiously. Okay? They suppress the spirit and they live out of their souls, their mind. It's based on what I know. Okay? They got things backwards. So, those are the three things I wanted to talk to you about. Now we're going to put them together, right? So you've got the heart and the mind, you've got the two trees in the garden, and you have the soul and the spirit. So this is what God showed me in a revelation. The mind is of the soul. Okay? And it connects to the world around you through your five senses. Okay? The mind functions with knowledge. It takes it in, it processes it, makes decisions, and then you act. Okay? That's how the mind works. The mind is not a bad thing, but it's intended to help you to function in this world. The mind is of this world for this world. Okay? The mind is not intended to help you navigate spiritual matters. The mind is not intended to help you commune with God. Alright? That's the job of the Spirit. Alright? But now, just as the mind is of this world and helps function in this world, the heart is of the Spirit. Okay? The heart is what connects you to God through the Spirit. And the heart functions not with knowledge, but with the wisdom of God. Alright? Just by way of scriptural verses, in 2 Corinthians 21:22, it says, "Now he who establishes with you in Christ and has anointed us in God, who also has sealed us and given us the Spirit, has given us the Spirit in our hearts as a guarantee." Alright? What I want to highlight here is that God has given us His Spirit, but He didn't give it to you in your mind. He gave it to you in your heart. Okay? So, I don't know if you guys know where I'm going with this. But, the story I was telling you about earlier, I was trying to connect to God with my mind. Right? Lots of studying, lots and lots of listening, reading. Couldn't connect. And I couldn't for the life of me work out why. Why couldn't I do it? Because everyone around me was doing the same thing. Right? No one knew any better. So what God has shown me is yes, you do have a mind. It has its purpose to help you function as well. But you also have a heart, and that is something a lot of people don't realize. You have a heart and it functions the same way as your mind, right? But your heart contains the Spirit of God, and it's through your heart that you're able to connect to God. Do you understand? So let me give you an example. In the last few years, I've gotten better and better at hearing from God. But this is when I hear from Him, right? I hear from Him when I'm walking, when I'm shopping, when I'm hanging out with other people. I hear from Him here, right? What's the common element in all of that? I'm busy doing something, right? That's when I hear from Him. Because I'm busy doing something, shopping, cooking, or whatever, and boom, the penny drops, something happens, something lands. Alright? But do you know when I don't hear from Him? When I sit down and I think real hard. And you strain. What do you want to say to me, you know? What do you want to say? I'm listening. And I'll sit there for a frustrating 20 minutes and nothing happens. Do you know why? It's because the mind is sitting over the heart. I'm trying to hear from Him with my mind. Alright? I strain with my mind. And it becomes even harder because my mind's like fully focused and it's in fifth gear and it's like really straining and it actually shuts down the heart. It suppresses the heart. Alright? So what you have to do, and what I've slowly started learning to do, and the results have been really encouraging, is you sit down and you try and turn this off. You don't focus in your mind. You focus on your heart. And your heart is in here. Okay? Your heart's in here. When the Bible talks about your heart, it's not talking about the actual organ. It's talking about your inner being, the core of who you are. And the core of who you are, some people will say it's the belly. Some people will just refer to it as the torso. You direct your attention down here. Yeah? And you just learn to listen. You learn to listen. And the more you direct your attention down here, the more this shuts down. Okay? One of the verses that is often quoted when people talk about hearing from God is Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. Right? One of the reasons that works when you want to hear from God and you're able to actually be still is because you're turning off your mind and you're allowing your heart to emerge. You're allowing your heart to speak. Okay? Now, the thing is that the soul and the spirit are very much in conflict. The soul demands, in many of us, because we've been conditioned and raised in such a way, the soul demands control over the spirit. Okay? And it feeds off the spirit, but it also suppresses it. Okay? So when you learn to quiet your mind, you allow your heart to emerge from that suppression. Okay? It takes a special effort because for many of us, the mind is really strong. The soul is very strong. So what we have to do is first recognize that there is a heart. You do have a heart. And it does speak. It's got a lot to say. And God will speak to you through that heart. But you have to give it a chance to emerge. Because the mind, the soul, doesn't want it to come out. Okay? So, you guys with me? Alright. Now, I know this might sound kind of strange to you guys, so as always, I encourage you to take this to God and let Him confirm it for you. Right. So if we go back to abiding, right? That's what abiding is all about. Abiding is recognizing that you do have a heart and a mind, and that there are two paths, each leading to those trees. The mind will take you to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the heart will take you to the tree of life. You get to choose. You get to choose. And you get to foster which connection you built and which tree you feed off. Okay? This was an amazing thing for me because it turned the tables on everything I knew. And it's giving me access to God that I've never had before. And it's truly wonderful, but at the same time it can be a little bit scary. What what God showed me about doing this, right, is I'll quote from Exodus. I'll read from Exodus 18:20. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings, the lightning flashes, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. This is when all the Israelites were around Mount Sinai, and Moses had just gotten the commandments. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood afar off. Then they said to Moses, "You speak with us, and we will hear, but let not God speak with us, lest we die." And Moses said to the people, "Do not fear, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin." So the people stood afar off, and Moses drew near the thick darkness where God was. Alright? So back then, Old Testament times, God was on a mountain and he was calling his people in. They chose not to, they chose to back off. What's particularly interesting is that they had an opportunity to approach the tree of life again, but instead they said, "No, you tell us what God said." Yeah? They opted for knowledge, not for relationship. Yeah? Unfortunately, they failed that test. But when we do this, right, God is now inside of us. When we approach him through our hearts and not our minds, we're doing the same thing Moses did. You step in through the thick darkness. All right? And there is an element of this that is scary, just like they were scared back then. All right? I'm not saying the fear is real. It's definitely not real. But when a heart is hurt, it can cause pause. It can cause hesitation in you. And it did. I'll tell you for a fact, it happened with me. When I learnt about this, I was excited and really not at the same time. All right? I can't explain it to you. It's like being hot and cold at the same time. You want to go in. I've been chasing this for over 10 years. Now I know about it and I don't want to step in. Right? And again, that's because my heart and my mind are out of alignment. My head wants to go in. My mind wants to go in, but my heart's like, All right? Now, there is that part. But it's not something we have to give into. It's certainly not something we need to give into. But just be aware of it. Be aware of it. There may be some hesitation. But when we enter into this place deep in our hearts, you've got to go in trusting God. You really need to trust him. You need to commit to him. You need to enter boldly and confidently. And, what was that line? You do need to acknowledge that he is inside of you. You do need to know that. Okay? And then you press into the thick darkness like Moses did. Okay? Now, this is the time we're in now. God is inviting us all in. Come, step into my darkness. Alright? What you don't want to be is the person who's holding back and saying, "Nah, I don't think so. I would rather hear about everything through someone else." Right? I think to some extent or another, we all have our personal Moses, right? The person we go to who can tell us what God is saying. Right? The time for that is coming to an end. God is calling us into his presence so that we can commune with him directly. The doors are open. And it's a question for all of us, you know. Are you willing to enter, or are you going to pull back? All right. So here's the thing as well. You learn. This is such a new. Well, for me, it was such a new thing. But you learn. You learn to connect to your heart. If you've never done this before, it's a strange thing. But you discover that there is stuff going down there. The moment you look and you focus and you pay attention, you discover that there is stuff going on. All right? And the more you focus and the more you pay attention, the sharper you get, the more sensitive you become. All right? And this is how you forge a connection with Jesus, right? You forge a connection with him. And this connection is capable of getting stronger and stronger, more powerful, and more permanent. All right? It becomes a connection that you can turn into at any time. It becomes a connection that you can turn into for provision, for guidance, for wisdom, for whatever it is that you need. All right? This connection becomes a conduit and a gate for Jesus' power to flow through to you, into your life, and into the world around you. So it's a connection that has to be fostered. It has to be encouraged. It has to be strengthened. You've got to invest in it and build it. All right? And the more you do it, the less you're going to rely on this. The less you're going to have to try and figure out what's going on. Who do I talk to try and explain to me what's happening? All right, you're not gonna need that anymore. When you turn in, all right, and you listen, it's not about doing nothing. It's about active listening. You are doing something. You're actively blocking out distractions. You're actively silencing your mind, and you're focusing intently on your heart. God may not speak immediately. He may not show you anything immediately. But keep going, build that sensitivity, and He'll come. He comes quickly. He does come quickly, and He'll surprise you. So this is essentially, it's probably a short one today, but this is what God has shown me about abiding in Him. Abiding in Him, not abiding in knowledge. All right, not abiding in knowledge, abiding in Him, because through Him we'll get everything we need. All right. So as you try and do this, just be aware of a few things. The enemy will come against you. He'll try and break this connection. He'll try and discourage you from doing it. He might try to scare you somehow. But resistance is also going to come from your soul. Your soul loves being in control. It wants to dominate everything. When I first started doing this, it was weird, but my mind started freaking out like a spoiled child, right? Yelling and screaming and blah, 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 blah. Didn't want to release control. All right, a little bit of persistence and it'll settle down, okay? And as you do that, your heart will start to emerge. Your heart will start to come out. And you'll start getting stuff, whether that's revelation or wisdom, whatever it is. Whatever it is God wants to do with you, you know? But it's all coming through the heart. You've got to shut down the head first. When you do this as well, do it boldly and confidently. Go in 100%. Don't go in dipping a toe in the water. If you do that, I can't be sure you're going to experience anything at all. You've got to be confident, you've got to be bold. Okay? And when you do it as well, there's different levels you can do it, you know? It's like swimming in an ocean, right? You can swim on the surface, or you can go down deep. You can go deep, 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 as much as you want. And finally, as I've said before, you can get into this weird place. I've come to it at least half a dozen times. You come to this place where you want to, but you don't at the same time. That's probably going to be your biggest challenge if you try and engage with this. All right. Just know that if you do encounter that, it's because your heart has some sort of issues, and it's reluctant to step in because it fears the presence of God for some reason. Although the heart has a different opinions to the mind, they're not necessarily logical, okay? They're not necessarily grounded in good theology. So sometimes you just need to muster up the courage and step in anyway. And God will deal with it on the other side. All right, so I think that's it, eh? Yeah, it was a bit of a short one today. But any questions, guys?